Hello and welcome. Settle in and allow me to share a story with you. A tale that promises to resonate deep within your soul. It is a story of true love, of courage, and of the choices that irrevocably shape our lives. Imagine, if you will, a young millionaire, haunted for years by the memory of a love he lost in his youth, now being forced into an arranged marriage he desperately does not want. And on the other side, a woman who never forgot her first love, who has kept her heart guarded all these years, waiting for a reunion that felt all but impossible. But destiny, as it so often does, has its own design. And when they meet again, in the most unexpected of ways, everything changes. You will be moved by the brave decisions he is forced to make, by moments of breathtaking tension, and by a scene at the altar that no one will ever forget. And what happens next? Well, that is a discovery you will make as our story unfolds. Before we begin, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to all of you who are a constant presence here, who leave such kind words and share these stories with others. You make all the difference. And if you are new to our community, I invite you to join us. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the poignant tales yet to come. Now, I'm curious. What are you doing as you listen? Are you cooking, tidying your home, or perhaps unwinding before sleep? Let me know in the comments below. I love to know how we share these moments together. And now that we are all settled, let us begin our story. Prepare your hearts, for this journey promises to be an emotional one, from its very first word to its last. The year was 2010, and the city of Fortaleza was sweltering under the typical Chiara heat, where a relentless sun beat down upon the streets of the Montese neighborhood. There, in a simple house with a blue gate, lived Heitor, a 15-year-old boy with eyes that shone brighter than any other in the vicinity. He was the son of Vicente, a hardworking man whose small construction supply business was just beginning to find its footing. Heitor was the kind of teenager who dreamed big but never lost sight of his roots. The family wasn't wealthy, but they were never in want. Vicente worked from dawn till dusk to provide the best for his wife, Helena, and their son, always repeating his belief that a better life was on the horizon. Son, he'd say, everything we achieve in this life comes from honest work and dedication. Helena, a gentle woman with an easy smile, managed the home and shared her husband's dream of watching the business grow. On the other side of that same street, in a house even more modest, its paint faded by the sun and plaster crumbling in places, lived Eloa. At 13, she was a girl who turned heads, not yet for a beauty that was still blossoming, but for the light that danced in her brown eyes and the sweet way she treated everyone. Eloa's family had fallen on hard times. Her father, Joao, had lost his job at a transport company months ago, and her mother, Maria, cleaned other people's houses just to put food on the table. Yet despite every difficulty, Eloa never lost her smile. She helped her mother with chores, cared for her little brother, and still found time to study, often under the yellow glow of a streetlight when their power was cut for non-payment. "My daughter," Maria would say whenever she saw Loa with her books, "even in the most trying of times, no matter what happens, you must study. You must build a future better than ours." It was on a Saturday afternoon when the heat was unbearable and the neighborhood children sought refuge in the shade of the trees that Heitor and Eloa truly met. They had exchanged distant greetings for years, being neighbors, but had never really spoken. On that day, Eloa was returning from the bakery with a bag of bread when she tripped on a loose paving stone. The bread scattered across the ground. She knelt there, trying to gather the loaves that weren't too dirty, knowing it was the only food they had for dinner. Heitor, who was washing his father's motorcycle in front of his house, saw it all unfold and ran to help. "Let me help you," he said, crouching beside her and gathering the scattered bread. "Thank you," Eloa replied, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Don't be ashamed," Heitor said, offering a smile that made the young girl's heart beat a little faster. "Everyone stumbles sometimes." In that simple moment, on the hot pavement of Fortaleza, everything began. From that day forward, Heitor and Eloa were inseparable. Every afternoon after school, they would meet in the neighborhood square to talk, to dream, and to share the small secrets that only teenagers in love can understand. Heitor would speak of his father's plans to expand the business, of his own ambition to study administration and help his family prosper. "One day, I'll have my own company," he'd say, holding her hand under the shade of a tree, "and then we can travel to beautiful places." She would listen, her eyes shining, believing every word that left his lips. "I want to study to be a teacher," Eloa would share. "I want to teach children like me, who don't have much, but who have big dreams." Heitor would squeeze her hand and swear he would help her achieve every one of them. They made plans for the future as if they were adults, promising they would one day marry and have a happy family. Innocent vows, but made with all the sincerity that only a first love can hold. As the months passed, their love blossomed, pure and beautiful. Heitor always found a way to help Eloa's family without wounding her pride. Sometimes he'd bring over food that Helena had made, always with an excuse. "My mother made too much and told me to share with the neighbors." Other times, he would appear with new school supplies, claiming he'd received duplicates. Eloa saw through his gentle deceptions, but she accepted them, knowing they came from a place of affection and respect. "When I'm grown, I'll repay all of this," she promised. "You don't have to repay anything," Heitor would answer. "When you love someone, you take care of them, and that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life." They shared their first kiss one December afternoon beneath the mango tree in the square as the sun set behind the neighborhood buildings. It was a timid kiss, full of love and promises, sealing what they both already knew in their hearts. They were meant to be together forever. But life had other plans. In early 2011, Eloa's family's situation grew even more dire. João couldn't find work in Fortaleza, and Maria's earnings from cleaning were barely enough to cover their bills. Then, an unexpected offer arrived. A cousin offered João a job at a factory in a town in the interior of Sao Paulo. It was a chance to start over, but it meant leaving everything behind, including Heitor. "Daughter, we have no choice," Maria explained one night as Eloa wept inconsolably in her room. "Your father needs to work, and there's nothing for him here. We'll go, save some money, and who knows, maybe one day we'll come back." Eloa knew her mother was right, but that knowledge did nothing to ease the ache in her chest. How could she live so far from Heitor How could their love survive such a distance? The farewell took place on a March morning as a moving truck parked in front of Eloa's house. Heitor had been there since dawn, helping carry the family's few belongings, trying to be strong so as not to make her departure any sadder. When the time came to leave, they embraced in front of everyone, heedless of the curious gazes of their neighbors. I will wait for you, Heitor promised, his eyes welling with tears he fought to conceal. And I will come back for you, Eloa vowed, holding his face between her hands. No matter how much time passes, my heart will always be yours. They exchanged phone numbers, promised to speak every day, and swore that nothing in the world could ever separate the love they felt. As the truck turned the corner and disappeared from view, Heitor stood alone on the empty street, feeling as though a part of himself had gone with her. The years passed like seasons, and the 15-year-old boy who promised to wait was now a man of 29, yet his heart still held the very same love. Heitor awoke on that April morning in 2024 in his luxurious apartment in Aldeota, the most affluent neighborhood in Fortaleza. He gazed out the 20th floor window at the city that had grown alongside him. His family's business had prospered beyond all expectations. Vicente had transformed that small supply company into a veritable empire. They now owned one of the largest construction firms in the Northeast. At 25, Heitor had become its CEO, commanding over 2,000 employees and spearheading projects that were changing the face of the city. But all that success left a bitter taste in his mouth, because the one person he wanted to share it with was gone. Heitor rose from the king-size bed he occupied alone each night and began his morning routine, a ritual that had become automatic and hollow. He had everything a man his age could desire: wealth, success, respect, an apartment worthy of a magazine cover, and imported cars in the garage. But when he looked in the mirror each morning, he saw a lonely man carrying a void in his chest that no professional achievement could ever fill. "Where are you, Eloa?" he would murmur to himself, a silent question he had asked every morning for years. He had tried to stay in touch during those first years after she moved, but phone numbers changed. Social media was not yet a part of their world, and slowly, thread by thread, they lost their connection. He never stopped searching for her, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack, in a state whose name he didn't even know. Over the years, Heitor had relationships, of course. He dated beautiful, intelligent women, some of whom were genuinely in love with him. But none of them had ever managed to touch his heart the way Eloa had when he was just a teenage dreamer. He compared every woman to his memory of her, and they all fell short. "You need to get over this teenage fantasy," Vicente would say whenever the topic arose. "That was a childhood crush, son. You're a grown man now. You need a woman of your caliber." But Heitor knew that what he felt for Eloa was no childish crush. It was the kind of love that brands a soul forever, that defines who you become, that you carry with you until your very last day. He was certain that if she walked through his office door at that very moment, his heart would race just as it had when he was 15. It was on a Monday morning, as Heitor reviewed contracts for a new development, that Vicente entered his office, wearing the particular smile that always preceded what he considered good news. "Son, I need to talk to you about a business opportunity that could elevate our company to a whole new level, Vicente announced, seating himself in the armchair opposite his son's desk. Helena was with him, her presence as gentle as ever. But Heitor noticed an unusual seriousness in her expression. Eduardo Cardozo wants to form a partnership with us, Vicente continued. He owns the largest logistics company in the Northeast. Together, we could dominate both construction and transport. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Heitor knew of Eduardo Cardoso by name and reputation. A wealthy, influential man whose fortune rivaled their own. And what does this have to do with me? Heitor asked, a sense of foreboding creeping in. He has a daughter, Helena said, her tone soft and persuasive. Antonella, a beautiful young woman, an administration graduate, intelligent, the same age as you. Eduardo thinks it would be perfect if the two of you got to know each other. Heitor's stomach tightened. He knew exactly where this was going, and he despised the direction. Mother, are you talking about an arranged marriage? He asked, struggling to keep his voice calm. It's not arranged, son, Vicente countered. It's an opportunity for you to meet a woman suited to your station in life. And, as a bonus, we secure the biggest deal in our company's history. It's a win-win situation. Heitor rose from his chair and walked to the window, staring down at the city below as he tried to process what his parents were proposing. Son, you're 29 years old, Helena said, approaching him with the maternal tenderness that always disarmed him. All of your friends are married, with children. You can't remain alone forever, waiting for a fantasy from the past. Those words, fantasy from the past, stung more than Heitor had expected. That was how his parents saw the love of his life. Eloa is not a fantasy, mother, he replied, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. She was real. What we felt was real. And I know that if we ever found each other again, Vicente cut him off with an impatient sigh. Heitor, for God's sake, it's been 14 years. If something was going to happen, it would have happened by now. You can't waste your life waiting for someone who has probably forgotten you even exist. The words were a knife in his chest. Seeing he had gone too far, Vicente softened his tone. Look, just meet the girl. I'm not asking you to marry her tomorrow. Just get to know her. See if there's any chemistry. Heitor resisted the idea for weeks, but the pressure from his family was relentless. Vicente spoke endlessly of the business opportunities they would lose if he refused to cooperate. Helena played on his emotions, speaking of her dreams of becoming a grandmother, of her desire to see her son happy and settled. Son, can't you at least try? She would plead, her eyes glistening with tears. For me? For your father? For our family? With every conversation, the weight of guilt grew heavier in Heitor's chest. He knew how hard his parents had worked to get where they were, how much they had sacrificed to give him every opportunity. Did he have the right to throw it all away for a love from the past, a love that might truly be impossible now? One night, alone in his apartment, gazing at an old photo of himself and Eloa that he kept in his wallet, Heitor made a decision that went against everything his heart screamed for. He would meet Antonella Cardoso. The first time Heitor saw Antonella was at a business lunch Vicente had organized at one of Fortaleza's most elegant restaurants. She was, as Helena had said, truly beautiful. Blonde hair, green eyes, a kind of beauty that would turn any man's head. She was intelligent too, speaking about business with an impressive ease. But as she discussed capital markets and expansion strategies, Heitor found himself wondering how different it would be if Eloa were sitting there across from him. Antonella was cold, calculating, viewing everything through the lens of business. There was no human warmth about her. She didn't have that light in her eyes, the one Eloa had. Heitor is a bit distracted today, Eduardo said with a laugh. He must be impressed by my daughter. Everyone laughed, but Heitor forced a smile that never reached his eyes. Antonella studied him with that analytical gaze, as if he were an investment she was evaluating. In the months that followed that first meeting, Heitor found himself in a situation he never imagined, feigning interest in someone he didn't love, while planning a future he didn't want. Antonella, for her part, seemed content with the arrangement. She showed no passion or deep emotion, but saw in Heitor a suitable partner for her life plans. We are compatible, she would say whenever someone asked about their relationship. We have similar goals and can build something solid together. It was all so rational, so planned, so soulless. Heitor tried to convince himself that it could work, that perhaps love would come with time. But deep down, he knew he was deceiving himself. Every night before sleep, he would stare at the ceiling and wonder where Eloa was. If she had married, if she ever thought of him. Her absence was a constant ache he had learned to carry, but one that never faded. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a simple house in the Antonio Becerra neighborhood, Eloa woke at 5 every morning for another day of work at the Cardoso family home. She was 27 now, but she still had the same sweet smile and light-filled eyes that had enchanted Heitor in their youth. Life had not been easy for her after the move to Sao Paulo. Her family had struggled for years to establish themselves, facing difficulties that at times seemed insurmountable. Her father found a factory job, but the salary barely covered the rent on a small house on the outskirts. Eloa studied when she could, worked since she was 16 to help at home, and always carried in her heart the hope of one day returning to Fortaleza and finding the love she had left behind. My daughter, you need to forget that boy and move on with your life, her mother would say, whenever she found Eloa lost in thought. It's been so long. He's probably married, with children. You can't waste your youth waiting for someone who might not even exist anymore. But Eloa couldn't forget. For all those years, she had saved herself for Heitor, as if bound by a sacred, silent vow she had made to herself. There had been suitors, of course, interested young men, some with good intentions, but none had managed to awaken in her even a fraction of what she felt for Heitor. It was as if her heart had been forever marked by that teenage love, leaving no room for anyone else. I know it's silly, she confessed to her best friend, Sandra, one of the few times she opened up. I know everyone thinks I'm crazy for waiting for someone who might not even remember me, but I feel it, right here, she said, tapping her chest, that we're going to meet again. I don't know how, I don't know when, but it will happen. Sandra would shake her head, worried, but she knew it was pointless to argue. Eloa had an unshakable faith in destiny and the power of true love. 2 years ago, when Eloa's parents finally saved enough money to return to Tiara, she felt it was a sign from the universe. We're going home, daughter, her father said, his eyes shining with joy. I got a job offer in Fortaleza, and your mother misses her homeland. Eloa could barely contain her excitement. Returning to Fortaleza meant a chance to find Heitor, to discover what had become of him. In the first few months, She searched for him discreetly, asking old neighbors, trying to find any information, only to learn his family had moved. The Almeidas became very successful, an old neighbor, Donna Francisca, told her. Vicente became an important businessman, and that boy, Heitor, is one of the richest men in the city now. They live in Aldeota, in a world of their own. A pang of tightness seized Aloa's heart. She was happy for him, of course, but she also felt the distance between them was now far greater than just kilometers. It was on an October morning that Aloa saw the ad in the newspaper. Housekeeper needed for a traditional Fortaleza family. Experience required. Apply in the Aldeota neighborhood. She wasn't looking for a job. She was working at a clothing store downtown, but something compelled her to call the number. Perhaps it was intuition. Perhaps it was fate. The interview was at the Cardoso mansion, an imposing house that took up an entire block. Antonella received her with a coldness Eloa would soon learn was her trademark. "Do you have experience with large houses?" she asked, looking Eloa up and down as if assessing a product. "Yes, ma'am. I worked for families in Sao Paulo," Eloa replied, maintaining the dignified posture her mother had always taught her. "The work is hard, but the pay is good. I expect total dedication and absolute discretion. I will not tolerate gossip or curiosity about the family's life." Eloa accepted without hesitation. She needed the job, and something inside told her it would be important for her future, though she didn't yet know why. Working for Antonella was a challenge. She was demanding, a perfectionist, and treated Eloa with a coldness that bordered on cruelty. "There's dust on the living room table," she'd say, running a finger over the surface Eloa had just cleaned. "Do it again." Or, "The towels aren't folded the way I like. I'll have to teach you all over again." Eloa swallowed the humiliations in silence. But there were times when her employer would talk on the phone about her upcoming engagement, about a wedding that would be the event of the year, about the millionaire fiancé every woman in the city envied. "Heitor is perfect for me," Antonella would tell her friends. "Rich, handsome, socially prominent. It will be a dream wedding." Eloa felt a strange twinge in her chest whenever she heard that name, but dismissed it as coincidence. Heitor was a common name. It could be anyone. What she didn't know was that destiny was weaving the greatest surprise of her life. For weeks, Antonella had been talking about an important dinner party, an official introduction of the two families. "It will be a special night," she said, checking every last detail. "Everything must be perfect. My future in-laws will be here, and I want to make a good impression." Eloy prepared for another night of intense work, serving illustrious guests at a party where, as always, she would be invisible. She never imagined that tonight, when the dining room door swung open and she entered carrying the first tray, she would come face to face with the eyes she had searched for 14 years, with the face that had changed, but that she would recognize anywhere, with the man who had never left her heart and who was sitting at the table, about to become her employer's husband. The night of the dinner arrived, heavy with the anticipation of an important event. Antonella spent the day fussing over every detail, from the floral centerpieces to the polish on the silverware. "Eloa, I want you to serve the table tonight," she instructed, watching the maid make final adjustments. "My parents and Heitor's parents will be here. It's a special occasion. I need you to be discreet, efficient, and to not draw any attention to yourself. Do you understand what that means?" Eloa nodded. She was used to Antonella's instructions, her constant need to delineate everyone's place in the house. And wear the black uniform, your most formal one, Antonella added, adjusting a white orchid. Eloa went to change, unaware that she was preparing for the moment that would alter her life forever. At 8 o'clock sharp, the first guests arrived. Eduardo and Beatriz Cardoso greeted Vicente and Helena Almeida with the practiced cordiality of a business meeting disguised as a family gathering. Eloa was in the kitchen, arranging appetizers, when she heard Antonella call, "Eloa, you can bring the canapes to the living room, please." She picked up the silver tray, took a deep breath as she always did before entering the lion's den, and walked towards the dining room. Her steps were steady. She could do this work with her eyes closed. As she pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped into the elegantly decorated room, her eyes scanned for the table. It was then that she saw him, a man with his back to her, talking to Eduardo Cardoso. Something in the line of his shoulders, his posture, the way he gestured, made her heart leap for no reason at all. Antonella, radiant in a navy blue dress, made the introductions with her perfect socialite smile. "Heitor, I'd like you to meet my parents, Eduardo and Beatriz Cardoso," she said, touching her fiancé's arm. "And these are Vicente and Helena Almeida, his parents." The greetings were warm, full of mutual praise. Then Eduardo gestured toward Eloa, who stood frozen by the table, tray in hand. "And this is Eloa, our housekeeper," he said, as if introducing a piece of furniture. "A very efficient girl." Antonella added, "Eloa, this is Heitor Almeida, my fiancé." And in that moment, as Heitor turned to politely greet his future wife's maid, the world simply ceased to exist for them both. His eyes met hers, and 14 years vanished in a fraction of a second. He knew her instantly. She had changed, yes. She was a woman now, not the 13-year-old girl he had left in tears on that March morning. But it was her. The same sweet gaze, the same brown eyes that haunted his dreams, the same lips that were now trembling with shock. Heitor's legs went weak, the air stolen from his lungs. He had to discreetly steady himself against the table. "Eloa," he murmured, a sound barely audible, but she heard it, and she knew. It wasn't a dream. It was Heitor, the man she had loved since she was 13, the man she had saved herself for. And he was standing right in front of her, engaged to her boss. The tray trembled in her hands. It took a superhuman effort not to let it crash to the floor. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Heitor was different, taller, stronger, with the bearing of a successful man, but his eyes were the same, burning with the same intensity that had always made her feel like the most important person in the world. "Excuse me," she managed to whisper, placing the tray on the table with shaking hands. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Almeida." The formality between them was a necessary lie. Heitor extended his hand, and when their fingers touched, a current of electricity shot through them both. He held her hand a second longer than was proper, and in that second, they spoke 1,000 words without a sound. "It's you. I never forgot. What is happening? Why are you here?" Antonella, busy with Helena, noticed nothing. But Vicente saw it all. He saw the way his son looked at the girl, the color draining from his face, the slight tremor in his hands. "Son, are you all right?" Vicente asked, stepping closer. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Heitor recovered quickly, forcing a smile. I'm fine, Dad. Just a little tired from work. But inside, he was reeling in pure panic. How was this possible? How, in a city of over 2 million people, had Eloa ended up in the house of the very woman he was about to marry? What kind of cruel twist of fate was this? He had spent years searching for her, and now he found her in the worst possible situation, serving as a maid in his fiance's home, just months before a wedding he had already resigned himself to. Throughout the dinner, Hader could barely pay attention to the conversations about business, about the wedding preparations, about plans for the honeymoon. His eyes sought out Eloa every time she entered the room to serve a course or clear empty plates. She maintained a professional posture, but he could see the tremor in her hands, the quickness of her breath, the way she carefully avoided looking directly at him. When she leaned in to pour wine or exchange a dish, Hater caught the subtle perfume she wore, the same clean, simple soap scent he remembered from their teenage years. It took an immense effort not to reach out his hand and touch her face. Hater, you're awfully quiet tonight, remarked Beatriz Cardozo, Antonella's mother. Your daughter must be making him nervous, Vicente laughed. It's normal. The wedding is just around the corner. Everyone chuckled, but Heiter forced a smile that never reached his eyes. The most tense moment of the evening came when Eloa was clearing the appetizer plates. She leaned down to pick up the dish in front of Heitor, and as she straightened up, she stumbled slightly on the Persian rug beneath the table. Heitor instinctively shot out an arm to steady her, and for a second, they were impossibly close. Their eyes locked, his hand gripping her arm firmly. Careful, he murmured, his voice emerging hoarser and more laden with emotion than he intended. Thank you, she replied, almost in a whisper. And in that thank you, there was so much more than gratitude for preventing a fall. There were 14 years of longing, of guarded love, of unanswered questions. Antonella watched the scene, her brow furrowed. There was something strange about their interaction, something she couldn't quite place, but it unsettled her deeply. Eloa, you can go to the kitchen now, Antonella said, her tone sharper than usual. I believe you've served everything that was needed. Eloa quickly pulled away, but Antonella continued to observe. She noticed how Heitor's eyes followed the maid until she had left the room. She saw the pensive expression that settled on his face after Eloa was gone. An uncomfortable suspicion began to grow in Antonella's chest. She knew that look all too well. It was the look of a man interested in a woman, but it couldn't be. Heitor was her fiancé. They were to be married in a few months. And Eloa was just a maid, a simple woman with no money or social standing. It made no sense. Still, Antonella decided she would keep a close watch to observe their interactions more carefully. Something was wrong here, and she intended to find out what it was. When the dinner ended and the guests departed with promises to meet soon to finalize the last wedding details, Hater left the house feeling as if his world had been turned upside down. He had found Eloa. After 14 years, after searching for so long, she was right there, just a few feet away. And yet, she had never been so distant. What was he going to do now? How could he marry Antonella, knowing that the love of his life was right there, working in her house? On the entire drive home, as he listened to Vicente talk about how productive the dinner had been and how profitable the business with the Cardoso family would be, Hater could only think of one thing. He had to talk to Eloa. He needed to know what had happened to her all these years. He needed to understand how she had ended up here. He needed to look into her eyes and ask if she still felt anything for him, or if he was alone in this love he had never managed to forget. The days that followed that dinner were a silent torture for Heitor and Eloa. Antonella, ever observant when it came to protecting her interests, began to notice small details that bothered her deeply. Heitor was different, more distracted, always lost in thoughts she couldn't decipher. During their conversations about the wedding, he would respond automatically, as if his mind were somewhere else entirely. Do you prefer white roses or orchids for the church decorations? She would ask. Whatever you want, he would reply, his gaze lost out the window. Heitor, I'm talking to you about our wedding, Antonella would insist, irritated. Sorry, I was thinking about a project at the office, he would lie, trying to focus on a conversation that felt increasingly unreal. How could he be planning a wedding when the woman he had always loved was just a few miles away, working as a maid in his fiance's house? Antonella decided she needed to investigate further. The following week, she began to watch Eloa more closely, searching for clues. It didn't take long for her to notice that the maid was different too. Eloa, who had always been discreet and efficient, now seemed nervous and distracted, as if something important were weighing on her mind. Eloa, you broke my porcelain cup, Antonella said one morning, pointing to the shards on the kitchen floor. That's never happened before. Is something wrong? Eloa hurried to clean up the mess, apologizing repeatedly. No, Miss Antonella, it was just my carelessness. It won't happen again. But Antonella wasn't convinced. There was something in the way Eloa spoke, in her nervous energy, that confirmed the suspicions growing in her mind. The confirmation Antonella was looking for came on a Thursday afternoon when she decided to come home from the office early. Heitor had called that morning saying he needed to stop by her house to discuss some wedding details and would arrive around 3. When Antonella walked in at 2:30, she heard voices coming from the back garden. They were low, whispered, as if the speakers were trying not to be overheard. She approached the living room window that overlooked the garden and saw a scene that made her blood run cold. Heitor and Eloa were standing there, near the jasmine bush, talking with an intimacy that made it clear this was not the first time they had spoken alone. How have you been, Eloa? What has your life been like all these years? Heitor was asking, his voice thick with an emotion Antonella had never heard him use with her. I thought of you every single day, Eloa replied, her eyes welling with tears. I could never forget what we had. Heitor took a step closer to her. Neither could I. I looked for you for years. I never stopped hoping you'd come back into my life. Antonella could feel her nails digging into her palms as she watched the conversation unfold. How was this possible? Her fiancé and her maid had a past together? And from the way they looked at each other, from the tenderness in their voices, it was clear it wasn't just any past. It was the kind of history that leaves a permanent mark on a person's heart. But you're going to marry her, Eloa said, trying to maintain her composure even as tears streamed down her face. How can I compete with that? She has everything I'll never have. Money, social standing, beauty. Heitor cut her off, gently cupping her face in his hands. Don't say that. She has everything except what truly matters. She doesn't have my heart. You've always had it, ever since we were teenagers, and you always will. It was at that moment that Antonella decided she had heard enough. She threw open the garden door with such force that it slammed against the wall, making a loud crack that startled them both. What a touching scene, she said, her voice as cold as ice. My fiancé and my maid having a romantic rendezvous in my garden. Heitor and Eloa sprang apart, but it was too late. Antonella had seen everything, heard everything, and the rage glittering in her green eyes was terrifying. Antonella, I can explain, Heitor began, but she cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. Explain what? That you're cheating on your fiancée with her maid? That the two of you have been making a fool of me? She turned on Eloa with a cruelty that made the younger woman flinch. And you little gold digger, what did you think you were doing? Seducing my fiancé to get out of your miserable life? To get ahead at my expense? Eloa tried to defend herself. Miss Antonella, it's not what you think. We were just talking. But Antonella didn't want to hear explanations. The humiliation of discovering she was being betrayed, and with a maid no less, was too much for her pride to bear. Talking? Antonella shrieked, losing the composure she always maintained. I saw you touching. I heard him say you have his heart. You've made an idiot out of me. She advanced on Eloa, her eyes blazing with hatred. You're nothing but a pathetic little maid trying to latch onto a rich man. Did you really think you could use me to get to him? Eloa tried to hold on to her dignity, even as tears flowed freely. I never meant you any harm. If you only knew our history. Antonella cut her off with a bitter laugh. History? What history? A maid doesn't have a history with a millionaire. You live in different worlds, and you need to learn your place. Heitor could no longer stand by and watch this humiliation. Enough, Antonella. Don't you speak to her that way. Don't speak to her that way, Antonella repeated, incredulous. You're defending your lover against your fiancé? That is the last straw. She turned back to Eloa with an expression of utter contempt. You're fired. I want you out of my house right now. And I never want to see your face again. And if you even think of going near my fiancé again, I will make your life a living hell. I have more than enough money and influence to destroy you. Eloa drew herself up, reclaiming a piece of the dignity Antonella was trying to strip away. I'm leaving, ma'am, but I want you to know that I loved Heitor long before you ever met him, and I don't need your money to be happy. She gave Heitor one last look, so full of love and sorrow that he felt his heart shatter. Goodbye, Heitor. I hope you'll be happy. And with that, she walked out of the house with her head held high, leaving behind the job she needed and the man she had always loved. Antonella turned to Heitor, consumed by a fury she had never felt before. And you? You're going to explain to me exactly what this history is between you two. Heitor was devastated, watching Eloa leave like that, humiliated and fired because of him. We knew each other when we were teenagers, he said, trying to control the emotion in his voice. We were together before she moved away from Fortaleza. I didn't know she had come back. I didn't know she worked here. Antonella laughed sarcastically. How convenient. The teenage love you never forgot just happens to show up in my house, working for me. And you expect me to believe it was a coincidence? Heitor met her gaze with a painful sincerity. It was a coincidence, yes. But now that I've found her again, I can't pretend I don't feel anything for her. Antonella felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. Are you saying you love her? Heitor took a deep breath before answering. I'm saying I have always loved her, and that marrying you, knowing this, would be a lie for both of us. Heitor's words echoed in the room like thunder, leaving a heavy, painful silence between them. She stared at him for several long seconds, trying to process what she had just heard. Her fiancé, the man she was supposed to marry in a few months, had just confessed his love for another woman. Are you telling me you're calling off our wedding for a maid? She asked, her voice trembling with rage and disbelief. For a woman who has nothing to offer you but some romantic teenage past? Heitor ran a hand through his hair, feeling the crushing weight of the situation. Antonella, I never wanted things to come to this, but I can't marry you while loving someone else. It wouldn't be fair to you or to me. Antonella let out a bitter laugh that held no humor. Fair? You want to talk about what's fair after deceiving me for months? After letting me plan a wedding while you were in love with someone else? The argument raged for hours, with Antonella alternating between pleas, threats, and attempts to make Heitor see reason. Heitor, be rational, she said, trying to control her tone. You're letting a teenage fantasy destroy your future. I am the right woman for you. We're from the same social class. We have the same goals. We can build an empire together. Heitor listened in silence, knowing that from a practical standpoint, she was right. Marrying Antonella made sense to everyone except his own heart. And what about the business? She pressed on. Your father is counting on this partnership. Are you going to destroy years of work over a whim? That word, whim, cut Heitor like a knife. What he felt for Aloa was not a whim. It was the truest, purest love he had ever known. The kind of love that defines who you are. The kind of love worth fighting for. When Heitor arrived home that night, Vicente and Helena were already waiting for him in the living room. Antonella had, of course, already called, telling them her version of the story. Sit down, son, Vicente said, using the serious tone he reserved for important conversations. You need to explain this madness Antonella told me about. Heitor sank into the armchair across from his parents, feeling like a teenager who had just been caught doing something terribly wrong. Dad, Eloa is back in Fortaleza. She was working at Antonella's house, and we saw each other again. Helena clutched her chest, as if she were struggling for air. Good heavens, Heitor, you can't be serious. After all these years, you're still thinking about that girl? Vicente shot up from his chair, his irritation palpable. Son, I'm only going to say this once. You are 29 years old. You're the CEO of a company worth millions. You're about to marry one of the most desired women in Fortaleza, and you want to throw all of that away for a housemaid? She's not a housemaid, Dad, Heitor retorted, a hot anger rising in his chest. She is the woman I have loved for 14 years, the woman I could never forget, no matter how hard I tried. Vicente slammed his fist on the coffee table, making the crystal ornaments chime. Love? What love, Heitor? You were children. That isn't love, it's nostalgia. It's a longing for a time that's gone for good. Helena tried a gentler approach. Son, I understand that seeing her again has stirred something in you. But think carefully about what you're doing. Antonella is a wonderful woman. You make a perfect couple. And this girl, well, she can't give you the life you deserve. Heitor looked at his mother, a profound sadness in his eyes. What life do I deserve, Mom? A life full of money, but empty of love. A life married to a woman I don't love, pretending to be happy forever? The days that followed were the most difficult of Heitor's life. The pressure from his family was constant and relentless. Vicente threatened to sever business ties, claiming Heitor was destroying a lifetime of work for a romantic fantasy. Helena wept, saying she no longer recognized her son, that he was making a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. The invitations have already been sent, son, she would remind him. 500 guests. It's the event of the year. How will you explain to everyone that you called off the wedding for a maid? Heitor tried to explain that it wasn't for a maid, but for the love of his life. They either couldn't or wouldn't understand the difference. Antonella didn't give up easily either. She would show up at his office, send flowers, and try to arrange romantic dinners to talk things over calmly. Hater, I know you're confused, she said during one of these attempts at reconciliation. It's normal. Every man gets nervous before his wedding, but you need to think with your head, not your heart. She tried to be seductive, to remind him of the good times they'd had, the plans they'd made. We can be happy, she insisted. We just need to leave this story in the past, where it belongs. But Hator knew that what he felt for Eloa did not belong to the past. It was his present, his future. It was forever. During this torturous period, Heitor couldn't find Eloa. He went to an address he'd managed to find, but the neighbors said she had moved after losing her job. He searched the places they used to go as teenagers. He asked old acquaintances from the neighborhood, but she seemed to have vanished. With each day that passed without news of her, Hater grew more desperate. What if she had given up on him? What if she had decided it wasn't worth fighting against all the barriers that separated them? The possibility of losing her again, now that he had just found her, was a torment that kept him from sleeping or eating. The weeks slipped by, and the wedding date approached inexorably. The preparations continued because, as Vicente constantly repeated, it was too late to cancel. The church was booked, the catering hired, the wedding dress purchased. Heitor felt like a condemned man walking to his execution. Every night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to find a solution that wouldn't hurt anyone, but that also wouldn't destroy his own chance at happiness. He thought about running away, just disappearing and leaving everyone behind. But he knew that would be an act of cowardice. If he was going to make a decision, he had to face it head on and accept the consequences. It was on the eve of the wedding that Heitor made his final choice. He was alone in his apartment, looking at the tuxedo he was meant to wear the next day, when a sense of absolute clarity washed over him. He could not marry Antonella. It didn't matter how many people would be disappointed, how many business deals would be lost, how many friendships would be broken. He could not live a lie for the rest of his life. If Eloa would take him back, if she still felt anything for him, they would face all the difficulties together. And if she no longer wanted him, at least he would have been honest with himself and with everyone involved. Heitor picked up the phone and called Vicente. Dad, I need to speak with you and Mom. It's important. When his parents arrived at the apartment, he took a deep breath and said, I am not getting married tomorrow. I'm sorry for all the trouble, but I can't do this. The wedding morning dawned with the typical blue sky of Fortaleza, not a single cloud to hint at the emotional storm about to break. Despite the decision he had made the night before, Heitor woke at 6 in the morning with his heart pounding, a mixture of panic and determination coursing through his veins. The conversation with his parents had been devastating. Vicente had stormed out, slamming the door and vowing that Heitor would be no son of his if he went through with this madness. Helena had cried until she had no tears left, begging him to reconsider, telling him he was destroying not only his own future, but that of the entire family. Son, for the love of God, think about what you are doing, she had pleaded. You cannot humiliate Antonella like this. You cannot do this to our family. But Heitor had been resolved. He could no longer live a lie. He couldn't marry a woman he didn't love while the love of his life was somewhere in the city, probably thinking he had chosen money and social status over her. But when the phone rang at 7 and Vicente appeared with the pressed tuxedo and the tie Heitor was to wear, he realized his parents had not given up. Son, you are going to get dressed, and you are going to that church, Vicente said, with an authority Heitor hadn't heard since his childhood. I've already spoken to Eduardo Cardoso. I explained you were nervous, had cold feet. He understood. Every man feels this way before his wedding. Helena entered the room, carrying a cup of coffee, trying to smile through the sadness that still marked her face. My love, your father is right. When you see Antonella walking down the aisle, beautiful in that dress, you'll remember why you fell in love with her. Heitor wanted to scream that he had never been in love with Antonella, that it was all nothing more than a convenient arrangement for their two families. But he knew his parents wouldn't listen. They had invested too much in this wedding, both emotionally and financially, to accept him backing out now. Pressed from all sides and drained of the strength for another argument, Heitor eventually gave in. Perhaps his parents were right, he thought, as he shaved with trembling hands. Maybe it really was better to move on, to forget Eloa once and for all, and try to build a life with Antonella. After all, Eloa had disappeared after their argument at the Cardoso's house. If she truly loved him, she wouldn't have left without a fight, would she? Heitor tried to convince himself of this as he dressed, but deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. Eloa had left because she had always known her place in the world, and she knew she couldn't compete with the money and influence of the Cardoso family. She hadn't given up on him for lack of love. She had given up because she thought he deserved someone better, someone who could offer him everything she couldn't. The Church of Our Lady of the Assumption was stunning that Saturday morning. Antonella had chosen a decor of white and gold, with thousands of white roses and orchids that perfumed the air. The pews were filled with 500 guests, the cream of Chiara society, all there to witness what promised to be the wedding of the year. Heitor arrived at 9:30, an hour before the ceremony, accompanied by his parents and groomsmen. He greeted the guests with the practiced social smile he had learned to use in business. But inside, a void was growing with each passing minute. You look so handsome, my son, Helena said, adjusting his tie for the third time. Antonella will be radiant when she sees you. Heitor forced a smile and nodded, trying not to think how different it would be if it were Eloa walking down that aisle to marry him. It was while Heitor was in the sacristy, receiving last-minute instructions from the priest, that he saw something that made his heart stop for a second. Through the small window that looked out into the nave of the church, he spotted a familiar figure sitting in the last pew, almost hidden behind a column. It was Eloa. She was there, in a simple but elegant blue dress, her hair pulled back in a low bun, trying to go unnoticed among the crowd of finely dressed people. Heitor's legs felt weak. Why had she come? What did it mean? Did she still have hope that he would change his mind? Or had she come only to say a final farewell to the love they had shared? Mr. Heitor, are you all right? The priest asked, noticing the groom's sudden pallor. Yes, father, just a little nervous, Heitor replied, unable to tear his eyes from the window. Eloa was there, because she couldn't stay away. Ever since she had left the Cardoso house on that terrible day, She had tried to forget Heitor and move on. She found a new job with a family in the Meireles neighborhood and tried to convince herself she had done the right thing by stepping away, that it was better to let him go through with his wedding and the life he had chosen. But on that Saturday morning, she had woken with an irresistible need to see him one last time, not to cause trouble, not to try to stop the wedding, but simply to hold in her memory the image of him, happy, on the most important day of his life. This is madness, she had told her reflection, looking at the blue dress she'd bought on sale. But I have to do this. I need to see him be happy, even if it's not with me. She arrived at the church as the guests were being seated and found the most discreet spot she could, hoping to see Heitor without being noticed. At 10:30 on the dot, the bridal march began, and Antonella appeared at the entrance of the church. She was truly breathtaking, just as Helena had predicted. The gown was a work of art in silk and lace, with a 10-foot train that two little flower girls helped carry. Her veil belonged to her grandmother, a vintage piece that added a touch of classic elegance. Every guest rose to their feet and turned to admire the bride, whispering compliments about her beauty. Heitor turned too, and for a moment he tried to feel some emotion as the woman he was about to spend the rest of his life with walked towards him. Antonella was beaming, clearly basking in the attention. But when Heitor's eyes met hers, he felt nothing but a profound emptiness. There was no love there. There was none of the connection he knew should exist between two people about to be married. When Antonella reached the altar and her father placed her hand in Heitor's, the priest began the ceremony with the traditional words that had been repeated millions of times in that very church. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God to join in holy matrimony. Heitor Vicente Almeida and Antonella Beatriz Cardoso. Heitor heard the words as if from a great distance. He answered the priest's questions automatically, repeated the vows he had memorized, but his mind was elsewhere. It was in the past, in the small square in the Montes neighborhood where he and Eloa had shared their first kiss. It was in the present, knowing she was there in the last pew, likely suffering as much as he was. And it was in the future, imagining a lifetime beside a woman he didn't love, while the true love of his life was somewhere in the city, alone and sad. Heitor Vicente Almeida, the priest said, arriving at the most crucial moment of the ceremony. Do you take Antonella Beatriz Cardoso to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and to honor, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, in richness and in poverty, for all the days of your life? The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Heitor looked at Antonella, who was smiling, waiting to hear the I do that would seal their union. He looked at his parents in the front row, their expressions expectant. He looked at the 500 guests who awaited his answer. And finally, he looked to the back of the church, where Eloa sat with her eyes full of tears, clearly in pain, but trying to be strong. It was in that moment that Heitor knew with absolute certainty that he could not do this. He could not speak a lie in that sacred place, before God and all those people. Heitor began, his voice trembling. I can't. A murmur of shock rippled through the church. Antonella stared at him in disbelief, her smile frozen, as if she had misheard. What do you mean you can't? She whispered. Heitor turned to the guests. He saw the horror on his parents' faces, the confusion and astonishment on every face that stared back at him. "I apologize to everyone," he said, his voice stronger now, "and I especially apologize to Antonella, who does not deserve this, but I cannot marry her." "It would be a lie," he said, his voice clear and steady, "an injustice to her and to me." He looked past the altar, past the stunned faces in the pews, his eyes finding the one person they were always searching for. "Because I love someone else. I have always loved her, and I always will." Without waiting for a reaction, Heitor descended the altar steps. He walked with a purpose no one had ever seen in him before, striding down the long aisle of the church toward the very last bench, where the woman of his life waited, her heart hammering against her ribs, her eyes wide with shock. The seconds that followed his declaration were absolute chaos. The church, moments before a sanctuary of solemn elegance, erupted into a cacophony of gasps, angry shouts, and frantic movement. Antonella stood frozen at the altar, a porcelain statue of disbelief, as the priest moved toward her, murmuring words of comfort she couldn't hear. Guests rose from their seats, some outraged, others merely curious, all whispering loudly about the scandal unfolding before them. "What is the meaning of this?" a woman in the front row cried out. "To leave a bride at the altar. Disgraceful," another guest muttered, shaking his head. Vicente and Helena scrambled after their son, desperate to intercept him before he reached Eloa, but Heitor moved with an unshakable resolve. When he finally stood before the last pew and held out his hand, Eloa looked up at him with a mixture of love, fear, and disbelief that tore his heart in two. "Come with me," Heitor said, his voice soft, his hand gently taking hers. "Please." She hesitated for a breath, her eyes darting around at the chaos, at the sea of faces staring at them with shock and indignation. "Heitor, are you sure?" she whispered. "You're throwing your life away for me." He cupped her face in his hands, right there, in front of 500 witnesses. "I'm not throwing my life away," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm saving it." He laced his fingers through hers and helped her to her feet. Together, they walked toward the great wooden doors of the church, moving through a gauntlet of scandalized guests. Some tried to block their path, others shouted things they chose not to hear. They just kept walking, hand in hand, leaving behind a world that would never have accepted them. Outside, the situation was no better. Vicente managed to catch them before they reached the car. "Heitor, stop this madness at once," he roared, his hand clamping down on his son's arm. "You can't do this. You are destroying our family, our business, our reputation." Helena was right behind him, weeping uncontrollably. "Son, for the love of God, go back inside. Apologize to Antonella. We can fix this." But Heitor was done, bending to his family's will. For the first time in his life, he was going to follow his heart, no matter the consequences. "Father, I tried to live the life you wanted for me. I tried to marry the woman you chose, to be the perfect son you dreamed of, but I can't do it anymore. I can't live a lie for the rest of my life." Just then, Eduardo Cardoso, Antonella's father, appeared in the church doorway, his face purple with rage. He was followed by his wife, Beatrice, and by Antonella herself, who had finally broken free from her trance. "You irresponsible boy!" Eduardo bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at Heitor. "You have humiliated my daughter, in front of all of Fortaleza society. You will not get away with this. Antonella advanced, her bridal gown dragging across the stone, her eyes blazing with hatred. You made a fool of me, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. You subjected me to the greatest humiliation of my life for her. Her gaze fell upon Eloa, laced with a contempt so potent it could have melted steel. For this insignificant little nobody who isn't worth the ground I walk on. To everyone's surprise, Eloa stepped forward, a quiet courage radiating from her. I may not have your money, Senora Antonella, she said, her voice steady, but I have something you will never have. His true love. The words landed like a bombshell. Antonella lunged toward her, but Heitor stepped between them, shielding the woman he loved. Enough, he shouted. Enough humiliation, enough insults. Eloa is worth more than all of you combined, because her love is real. It comes with no conditions, no calculations. Vicente stared in disbelief. Heitor, you've lost your mind. This woman has nothing to offer you, nothing. Heitor looked at his father, his expression filled with a deep sadness. She has everything to offer me, father. She has love and kindness and a beautiful soul. That's all I have ever wanted. Helena played her final, desperate card. Son, if you walk away with her now, don't ever come back. You will no longer be our son. The words cut Heitor like a knife, but his decision was made. If that's how you feel, then so be it, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I would rather be happy far away from you than miserable by your side. He opened the car door and helped Eloa inside, ignoring the storm of shouts and threats that continued to rain down on them. You'll regret this, Eduardo screamed. I'll make sure you're ruined in business. I will tell everyone what kind of man you are. Vicente added the final blow. Consider yourself disinherited. I never want to see your face again. Heitor started the car and sped away, leaving behind the church, the furious families, and a lifetime of obligations that had never truly been his. During the drive, neither of them spoke. Eloa cried softly, her mind reeling. Heitor drove in silence, his hands trembling on the steering wheel, still struggling to believe what he had just done. He had left his bride at the altar, fought with his parents, forfeited his family's business, and become a pariah in high society. But when he glanced at Eloa beside him, at the tears tracing paths down her cheeks, he knew, with every fiber of his being, that he had made the right choice. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Heitor replied, but we're going together, and that's all that matters. He pulled the car over at a deserted beach. They got out and walked onto the sand, still in their wedding attire, trying to absorb the dizzying reality that they were finally free, but that they would have to rebuild their lives from nothing. Heitor, are you sure about this? Eloa asked, her hand clutching his as they walked by the water's edge. You've lost everything because of me. Your family, your business, your place in society. He stopped and pulled her close. I lost nothing, Eloa. I gained everything. I gained you. I gained the chance to be truly happy. I gained the right to live my own life. He kissed her forehead with infinite tenderness. I searched for you for 14 years. I'm not letting you go again, no matter what. She melted into his arms, feeling for the first time in a long, long time that she was exactly where she belonged. I love you too, she whispered. I have always loved you. I always will. And there, on that beach in Fortaleza, as the sun set on the horizon, and the waves washed the shore, Heitor and Aloha sealed with a kiss the promise that they would never be parted again, no matter what storms life might bring. The first few days were difficult, but they were also the most real of their lives. Heitor couldn't return to his apartment, which technically belonged to his family. Eloa had lost her job as soon as the news of the canceled wedding spread. They checked into a simple hotel on Irasima Beach, far from the prying, judgmental eyes of the city's elite. "We don't have much money," Heitor said, counting the bills in his wallet. "But we have each other, and that's more than I've had for the last 14 years. Eloa gave him the sweet smile he had cherished in his memory for so long. "I don't need luxury to be happy, Heitor. I just need you." They spent hours talking, weaving together the frayed threads of 14 years apart, filling the silent voids left by a decade of longing. "Tell me about your life in Sao Paulo," Heitor said one afternoon as they lay on the simple hotel bed. "I want to know everything. Every day, every moment." Eloa took a deep breath. "It was hard at first. It took Papa a long time to adjust to the factory work. Mama didn't know anyone. I cried myself to sleep every night, thinking of you, wondering if you even remembered me." She paused, her fingers tracing a pattern on his chest. "I studied when I could. I started working at 16 to help the family. I had a few suitors, but I could never feel anything for them. It was like my heart was branded with your name, and no one else could ever erase it." He held her tighter, a wave of sorrow for their lost years washing over him, followed by a profound gratitude that her love had endured. "And you?" she asked, tilting her head to look into his eyes. "What was your life like without me?" Heitor sighed, stroking her hair. "It was empty, even with all the success. I built a business empire, made more money than I could ever spend. But every night, I went to bed thinking of you. There were other women, yes, but none of them ever came close to what I felt for you when we were just kids." He kissed her forehead. "I looked for you for years, Eloa. I hired private investigators. I searched online. I asked anyone who might know anything. When I finally agreed to marry Antonella, it was because I had given up all hope of ever finding you." Tears welled in Eloa's eyes. "If only I'd known you were looking for me." He silenced her with a gentle kiss. "It doesn't matter anymore. We're together now." It was on their third night at the hotel that they finally gave themselves to each other completely. It wasn't planned. It simply happened, as naturally as a river flowing to the sea, the inevitable conclusion of a love that had waited 14 years to be whole. Eloa was nervous. She had never been with a man before, but as Heitor began to kiss her with that infinite tenderness only he possessed, all her fears melted away. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his eyes searching hers. "I can wait as long as you need." She smiled, her trembling hands cupping his face. "I've waited my whole life for you. I don't want to wait another minute." And when they came together, it was as if two souls, torn apart by force, had finally found their way back to one another. There was no rush, no urgency. There was only love and tenderness and the absolute certainty that this was forever. "I love you so much it physically hurts," Heitor whispered afterward, as Eloa lay upon his chest, listening to the rhythm of the heart that was now hers. "For years, I felt like a part of me was missing. Now, I know what that part was." Eloa lifted her head and kissed him softly. "You were the missing part of me, too. Whenever anyone asked why I wasn't dating, why I wasn't married, I told them I was waiting for someone. They thought I was crazy, but I always knew. I knew you would come back to me. They stayed awake until dawn, talking, kissing, rediscovering each other, and laying the foundation of a new life they would have to build from scratch. A life built on the strongest foundation of all, true love. In the days that followed, they began to make practical plans. Heitor had some personal savings, money he had set aside over the years that was separate from the family business. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to start over, he said, showing her the bank statements. We could open a small business, something of our own, built by the two of us. Eloa looked at the numbers in astonishment. To her, who had always lived with so little, it seemed like a fortune. Heitor, this is a lot of money. You could live for years without working. He laughed, pulling her into an embrace. I don't want to live without working. I want to build something with you. I want us to start our life the right way, working together, dreaming together. They spent hours discussing possibilities. A small restaurant, a shop, maybe something in construction, since it was a world Heitor knew. First, they looked for a place to live. They wanted nothing luxurious, just a space that was theirs, where they could be happy, far from judgment and pressure. They found a small but cozy apartment in the Benfica neighborhood, with 2 bedrooms, a modest living room, and an open kitchen. It's perfect, Eloa said, looking out the window at a tree-lined square. We can be happy here. Heitor wrapped his arms around her from behind, kissing her neck. We can be happy anywhere, as long as we're together. They signed the lease that same day and began to furnish the apartment piece by piece, choosing every table, every dish, every small decorative detail with the care of 2 people building not just a house, but a home. Their first month together felt like a prolonged honeymoon. They would wake early and have breakfast on the small balcony, planning their day, talking about everything and nothing. Heitor had found a position at a mid-sized construction firm. He was no longer a CEO, but a project manager. The salary was a fraction of what he was used to, yet the work brought him a satisfaction he had never known. It was honest, and he was doing it for love, not out of obligation. Every afternoon, as Heitor stepped through the door, Eloa would ask with genuine warmth, "How was work today?" Her voice, laced with care, made him feel like the wealthiest man alive. Eloa had finally landed her dream job as a teaching assistant in a public school, helping children learn to read. I'm teaching kids their ABCs, she'd say, her eyes sparkling with joy. The pay isn't much, but it's the work I've always wanted. Their evenings were the highlights, filled with simple pleasures like cooking together, turning the kitchen into a haven of affection and shared laughter. Heitor had discovered a love for cooking, with Eloa as his patient guide. Not like that, my love, she'd tease, showing him how to season the fish just right. Let me teach you. In those moments, as they kissed amidst the bubbling pots and the aroma of home-cooked meals filling their cozy apartment, Heitor knew he'd made the right choice. After dinner, they'd settle on the small sofa, Eloa resting in his lap, watching TV or whispering about the future. What names would you like for our children? She'd ask playfully, toying with the buttons on his shirt. Heitor would smile. Our children? Are you already thinking about that? She'd blush a little. I've thought about it since we were teenagers. I always dreamed of having your kids. Her easy talk of their shared future made his heart swell with love and gratitude. 2 months into their life together, in that snug Benfica apartment, Eloa noticed changes in her body that left her both curious and anxious. Her cycle, always regular, was now 2 weeks late. At first, she blamed the stress of their new life, the adjustment to her job, and the emotional whirlwind they'd been through. But when morning nausea and unusual tenderness set in, she knew she had to find out. Could it be? She murmured to herself in the bathroom mirror, searching for any signs. The thought of being pregnant made her nervous. They were still building their financial footing. But it also filled her with happiness, as it meant fulfilling her long-held dream of starting a family with Heitor. One morning, while he was out for a work meeting, she decided to take a test. She bought it from a distant pharmacy to avoid any familiar faces and hurried back home, her heart racing. Following the instructions carefully, she waited with growing anticipation. When the result appeared, 2 lines positive, her legs weakened. She was pregnant. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she stared at the test, letting the reality sink in. After years apart and so much pain, they were finally building a real family. Tears of pure joy streamed down her face. That afternoon, when Heitor returned, he found Eloa in the kitchen, finishing dinner with an unusual glow in her eyes. "How was work today?" she asked, her voice brimming with excitement. "It was good, love. We landed a big contract," he replied, leaning in for a kiss. "And you? How was your day?" She smiled, barely containing her news. "It was special. Very special." Unable to wait any longer, she said, "Heitor, I need to tell you something." He paused, setting aside his work papers, and gave her his full attention. "What is it? Is everything okay?" She took a deep breath, placed his hand on her still flat belly, and said, "We're going to have a baby." The silence that followed felt endless to her, though it lasted only seconds. His face shifted from surprise to disbelief, then to pure joy. "A baby?" he repeated, as if needing to hear it again. "Are you sure?" She showed him the test, and he held it reverently like a treasured gift. "I took 3, and they're all positive." In that moment, he swept her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen, laughing and crying together. "We're having a baby! Eloa! We're going to be parents!" His happiness was infectious, and they embraced with an intensity that fused their hearts. "I can't believe it," he said, setting her down, but keeping his hands on her waist. Kneeling, he kissed her belly tenderly. "Hello, little one. I'm your daddy, and I already love you more than you can imagine." Eloa stroked his hair, her heart overflowing. "Are you really happy? We didn't plan this so soon." He cupped her face in his hands. "Happy? Eloa? I feel complete for the first time. I always knew something was missing, a void I couldn't fill. Now I know. It was you, our family, this moment." He kissed her with a passion that said more than words ever could. "I feel like the luckiest man in the world." That night, they stayed up late, dreaming about the future, wondering if it would be a boy or a girl. "I don't care, as long as they're healthy and look like you," Eloa said. Heitor laughed. "I want them to look like you, with your kind eyes and beautiful smile." They talked about names, nursery decorations, and how to rearrange the apartment. "We'll need a crib, clothes, diapers." Heitor mentally listed everything. "Slow down, love," Eloa chuckled. "We have 7 months to prepare. Yet, she was just as eager. In the days that followed, Heitor became the most devoted future father, buying books on pregnancy, vitamins, and researching doctors. Heitor, you're more anxious than I am. She'd laugh, watching him flip through parenting guides. I just want to be the best dad possible, he'd reply. At prenatal appointments, he attended every scan, asking endless questions. Is the baby developing well? Is the heartbeat strong? The doctor smiled at his enthusiasm. Everything's perfect. A healthy pregnancy. When they first heard the baby's heartbeat, Heitor teared up and had to step out to compose himself. That's our child, he whispered, still emotional. Each morning, he'd wake early, gaze at Aloha, sleeping with his hand on her growing belly, and thank fate for this second chance. Good morning, Mama, he'd whisper, kissing her gently, then her belly. Good morning, baby. She'd wake with a smile, cherishing their ritual. We slept well, she'd say, stretching in his arms. But I think this one's going to be active. They were kicking all night. He'd place his hand on her stomach, beaming. They already know Daddy's here. Their happiness was so genuine that it turned even ordinary moments into magic. Meanwhile, just 3 miles away in the Aldeota mansion, Helena Almeida lay awake at night, haunted by the son she'd lost to pride. 4 months had passed since the church scandal, and regret consumed her. Vicente, we made a mistake, she said one evening, finding her husband on the balcony, staring sadly at the city. Our son is happy, and we drove him away. Vicente sighed, his own resolve crumbling. He'd tried to convince himself Heitor had chosen wrong, trading privilege for romance. But deep down, he knew better. He was always a good boy, Vicente murmured. Never gave us trouble, always did as we asked. Maybe we asked too much. Hearing that Heitor was thriving as a project manager at a smaller firm made Vicente rethink everything. It wasn't recklessness, it was courage, standing by his heart. Through a discreet source, Dolores, who cleaned nearby, Helena learned of their life. They seemed truly happy, holding hands and smiling. Dolores shared, Ella was a sweetheart, polite, hardworking, teaching at a public school. Helena was surprised. She'd imagined Eloa as opportunistic, but she sounded kind and genuine. Then came the news that changed it all. Eloa's pregnant, about 4 months along. Heitor's by her side, every step. The words hit Helena like a blow. Her son was becoming a father, and she might miss it all. That night, she cried for the distance, the grandchild she'd never know. I can't take this anymore, she told Vicente the next day. He's having a baby, and we're still holding on to pride. Vicente nodded. Then let's go to them. Let's ask for forgiveness, and hope they let us back in. Their first move was subtle. Helena had Dolores deliver a card to Eloa with her phone number and a simple message. I'd love to talk. Helena Almeida. When Eloa received it, she showed it to Heitor immediately. What do you think she wants? She asked, turning the card in her hands. He frowned. I'm not sure. It could be anything, he mused, from a genuine attempt at reconciliation to a trap meant to harm us. They decided Aloha would be the one to call Helena, but cautiously, without raising any hopes. The phone call was brief and formal, yet Helena managed to convey her sincerity. Eloa, she began, I know I have no right to ask this after the way I've treated you both, but I would very much like to speak in person. I can come there, or you can come here, whatever you prefer. Eloa glanced at Heitor, who gave a firm nod of agreement. You can come here, Mrs. Helena. Sunday afternoon, if that's convenient for you. When Helena arrived at the modest apartment in Benfica, her heart clenched. It wasn't the simplicity of the place, but the stark difference between this humble life and the world of luxury Heitor had left behind. Eloa greeted her at the door, visibly 5 months pregnant, with that special glow that happy, expectant mothers have in their eyes. Mrs. Helena, welcome, Eloa said politely. Please come in. Helena looked at the daughter-in-law she had never truly known and felt a sharp pang of regret. Eloa was truly beautiful, but with a natural, sweet kind of beauty, free of artifice. There was a light in her eyes, a serenity that spoke of genuine happiness. Thank you for having me, Helena said, her voice thick with emotion. I know I don't deserve it, after everything. Heitor appeared in the living room, tense, but willing to hear what his mother had to say. Mother. The word came out laden with months of pent-up emotion. My son. Helena approached slowly, as if afraid he might run. Are you well? Are you happy? Heitor looked at Eloa, who was cradling her belly with both hands, and a smile broke across his face. I'm happier than I have ever been in my life, Mother. Helena's gaze followed her son's to Eloa's rounded stomach. May I? She asked, extending a hand toward the baby bump. Eloa looked to Heitor, who nodded, and then she smiled at her mother-in-law. Of course. Helena placed her hand delicately on the belly and felt a gentle flutter. My God, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. It's my grandchild. And in that moment, feeling the baby stir beneath her hand, Helena knew she had to make peace with her son, no matter the cost. The conversation that followed was one of the most emotional and important of their lives. Helena sat on the modest sofa, with Eloa beside her and Heitor in the armchair across from them. For the first time in months, she was able to speak the words that had been caught in her heart. Son, I came here to ask for your forgiveness. Your father and I were so wrong, terribly wrong. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. We were so concerned with business, with social standing, with what other people would think, that we forgot what truly matters. Your happiness. Heitor listened in silence, watching the mother, who had always been so strong and controlled, show her vulnerability for the very first time. When I found out you were going to have a baby, Helena continued, I realized I was going to lose the most important moments of my grandchild's life because of my own pride, and that broke my heart. She turned to Eloa with touching sincerity. Eloa, I judged you without knowing you. I treated you poorly without seeing who you truly are. And now, seeing you two together, seeing how happy my son is, I understand. You are exactly what he needed in his life. Eloa, moved by her mother-in-law's honesty, took Helena's hand. Mrs. Helena, I never wanted to take Heitor away from his family. I know how important you are to him, and I would love for our baby to grow up knowing their grandparents. Helena squeezed her daughter-in-law's hand, feeling an immediate connection to the woman who had captured her son's heart in such a pure and true way. Can you forgive me? Forgive us? Heitor rose from his chair and came to sit on the other side of his mother. Mother, you don't have to ask for forgiveness. I understand you were trying to protect me in the only way you knew how. What matters is that we're all here now together. Helena hugged her son tightly, weeping with relief. I've missed you so much, my son. The house felt so empty without you. Heitor returned the embrace, feeling as though an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. I missed you too, Mother. I missed our family. I missed you being a part of my life. Vicente arrived half an hour later, carrying flowers for Eloa, and wearing a look more humble than Heitor had ever seen on his father. Son, he said, stopping at the entrance to the living room, as if unsure he was allowed to enter. Father. Heitor stood and walked toward him, extending a hand, but Vicente pulled him into a tight embrace instead. Forgive me, son. Forgive me for being so stubborn, so proud. Vicente then looked at Eloa and gave a respectful bow. Eloa, you can call me Vicente or you can call me Dad, if you like. It would be an honor. Eloa smiled, touched by her father-in-law's change of heart. It's a pleasure to truly meet you, Vicente. Vicente approached the chair where she was sitting and, with a gentleness that surprised everyone, knelt beside her. May I speak with my grandchild? Eloa laughed, placing his hand on her belly. Of course you can. Vicente leaned his mouth close to her stomach and whispered, Hello, little one. This is Grandpa Vicente. I promise I'm going to take very good care of you, and your mommy, and your daddy. In the weeks that followed the reconciliation, Heitor and Eloa's life changed completely. Helena came by every day to help with preparations for the baby, bringing clothes, toys, and sharing her own experiences as a mother. When Heitor was born, I was so nervous I could barely even bathe him properly, she told Eloa as they organized the little nursery they had set up. You'll see, it's all much more natural than we imagine. Vicente began to include Heitor in the family business again, not as a demand, but as an invitation. Son, if you want to come back to the company, you'll be more than welcome. But if you'd rather stay where you are, I support that too. Heitor chose to keep his current job until the baby was born, but he agreed to help his father with specific projects on the weekends. I want to build my own path first, he explained, but it's good to know I can count on you. The family was rebuilding itself on a more solid foundation, one based on respect and true love, not on obligations and expectations. The birth of Raquel took place on a sunny December morning. After 12 hours of labor that left Heitor more nervous than Eloa herself, he never left her side for a single minute, holding her hand, wiping sweat from her brow, whispering words of encouragement. You are the bravest woman in the world, he would say, watching her endure the contractions with a strength that astonished him. Our daughter is going to be so proud of you. When Raquel was finally born, at 9:15 in the morning, weighing 3.2 kilos, Heitor cried so much the nurse had to hand him a tissue. She's perfect, he whispered, gazing at his daughter's red, wrinkled face. She's ours, Eloa. She's really ours. Eloa, exhausted but radiant, smiled as she watched her husband hold their daughter for the first time. She has your eyes, she said, and your nose too. Heitor kissed his wife's forehead with infinite tenderness. Thank you for giving me the most beautiful family in the world. Helena and Vicente arrived at the hospital an hour after the birth, carrying balloons, flowers, and an air of first-time grandparent anxiety that made everyone laugh. Where is my granddaughter? Helena asked, her eyes still red from crying with emotion. I want to meet Raquel. When they saw their granddaughter for the first time, the emotion was so overwhelming that they both wept together. She's just so beautiful, Helena whispered, gently touching the tiny hand. She looks just like Heitor when he was born. Vicente, who had always been a man of few words when it came to feelings, couldn't speak at all. He just gazed at his granddaughter with an expression of pure, absolute love. Welcome to the family, Raquel, he finally murmured. Grandpa is going to take very good care of you. Eloa watched the scene, her heart overflowing with happiness. The family she had always dreamed of was here, complete, united by the strongest love there is. The first few months with Raquel were a constant discovery for Heitor and Eloa. They took turns on late night duty, changed diapers together, and bathed their daughter with the care of someone handling the most precious thing in the world. She's growing so fast, Heitor would say, watching Raquel sleep in the crib that Vicente had insisted on buying. It feels like she was born just yesterday. Eloa would nestle into his arm, the two of them watching their daughter with that unconditional love only parents can feel. And to think, a year ago, we didn't even know if we would ever find each other again, she murmured. Destiny is an incredible thing. Heitor kissed the top of her head. Destiny, and the courage to fight for what we believe in. If I hadn't had the courage to leave everything at the altar, we wouldn't be here now. Eloa smiled, and if I hadn't had faith that we would meet again one day, maybe I would have given up waiting. When Raquel turned 6 months old, Eloa discovered she was pregnant again. Already? Heitor laughed when she told him the news. Raquel is going to have a little brother or sister. They were on the balcony of their apartment, which they had upgraded to 2 bedrooms after Raquel was born, thanks to a promotion Heitor had received at work. Are you happy? Eloa asked, always a little insecure when it came to big changes. Happy is an understatement, Heitor replied, pulling her into an embrace. I am fulfilled, complete, blessed. 2 years ago, I was alone, unhappy, and about to marry a woman I didn't love. Today, I have you, I have Raquel, and we have another baby on the way. How could I not be happy? Helena and Vicente were ecstatic with the news of a second grandchild. Raquel is going to have a playmate, Helena celebrated. She won't grow up alone. Vicente, who had transformed into the most doting grandfather in Fortaleza, was already making plans for the second baby's room. Their second child, a boy they decided to name Miguel, was born when Raquel was 1 year and 2 months old. The family grew, the apartment became too small, and they decided to move to a larger house in the same neighborhood so as not to lose the simplicity they valued so much. Vicente offered them a mansion in Aldeota, but Heitor politely declined. Dad, we like our simple life. This is how we're happy. And they truly were. Heitor had started his own construction company, specializing in affordable housing. Fulfilling his dream of helping families like Eloa's had once been to own their own homes. Eloa continued to work at the public school, now as a pedagogical coordinator, fulfilling her dream of making a difference in education. On weekends, they would gather at Vicente and Helena's house, who had become the most present and affectionate grandparents imaginable. Do you know what I love most about our story? Eloa said one evening as they stood on the porch of their new house, watching Raquel and Miguel play in the small garden they had made for them. It's that we proved that true love always finds a way to work out. Heitor wrapped his arms around his wife, watching their children run and laugh as Helena and Vicente arrived for the Sunday dinner that had become a tradition. And that sometimes, he added, you have to have the courage to give up everything to gain everything. If I hadn't had the courage to choose you at that altar, we would never have this beautiful family. Eloa turned in his arms and kissed him with the same love she had felt since she was 13 years old. And if I hadn't had faith that we would find each other again, I would never have waited for you. They stood there in an embrace, watching their family grow and multiply around them, knowing they had built the exact life they had always dreamed of. Simple, honest, and overflowing with true love. And so, dear listeners, we conclude another story that teaches us that true love will always find a way to overcome any barrier. Heitor and Aloha showed us that sometimes we must have the courage to let go of everything to gain what truly matters in life. They proved that no amount of money, social status, or family pressure is stronger than a heart that loves truly. Their story reminds us that destiny may take its time, but it never fails. 14 years apart were not enough to erase a love that was born pure and true. And when they found each other again, they had the wisdom to fight for what they felt, even knowing they would face many difficulties. Today, Heitor and Eloah live happily with their children, building a family based on love, respect, and simplicity. They teach us that true wealth is not found in material possessions, but in the people we love and who love us back. I hope this story has touched your heart as much as it has touched mine. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories, and share this with those you love. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I always read every single one with great care. May God bless each and every one of you with much love, much happiness, and much faith in the power of your dreams. Until the next story, the